Welcome back to Irenic Works. Quick reminder before we dive in. This show uses Claude, Anthropic's AI, to help with research and source scoring. I'm your host, a Latter-day Saint, which matters since LDS is one of the 9 groups we score. Full disclosure, every episode. Here we're going to take one last deep look at some additional sources before we charge on. As always, Claude assists with research. Mistakes happen. Flag them in the comments. And yes, I'm LDS, one of the 9 groups this show scores. Now, on to today's sources. The Elimination Registry was never actually a closed book. Episodes 5A, 5B, and 6B walked our candidate pool through the completeness filter and the 3-axis rubric. But new manuscripts and new attention to manuscripts we already had don't stop showing up. Today, we're covering 9 sources. The latest registry review surfaced as newly passing, plus a first independent look at the additions to Daniel. Here's a fun one before we get into the scoring. Joseph and Asenath basically reads like a Hellenistic romance novel. Egyptian priest's daughter falls for Joseph, converts, gets an angelic visitation for her trouble. Its Christological and divine focus score lands exactly on our 60% floor. Real content, but it's genuinely playing second fiddle to the love story. Quick refresher on method for anyone just joining us. Step 3 is the completeness filter. Anything surviving only as fragments gets cut before scoring starts. Step 4 is the 3-axis rubric. Theological alignment, Christological or divine focus, and moral teaching density, each scored 0 to 100%. The qualifying rule is a per-axis floor at 60%. A text has to clear all 3 individually. A strong average can't rescue a text that fails even one axis. And primary versus secondary is a confidence flag, not a provenance flag. Secondary just means a text passed by, landing exactly at that 60% floor on one axis. Step 3 first, completeness. All 12 texts we're covering today survive as complete works. None get cut at this stage. Now, the 3 axes themselves. Axis 1 is theological alignment. How consistent the text is with the theology already in the accepted canon, measured against our baseline reading, not any one sex doctrine. Axis 2 is Christological or divine focus. How much of the text actually centers on God or Christ versus being incidental. Axis 3 is moral teaching density, normative ethical instruction versus narrative filler. Let's start with our strongest primary passes. 2 Baruch, written in the shadow of Jerusalem's destruction, exhorting covenant faithfulness even as the temple lies in ruins. Apocalypse of Abraham, a throne vision doxology voiced through the angel Yahuel, strong on divine focus. And 4 Ezra, the strongest of the whole batch, a sustained meditation on judgment and the coming age that early Christian writers quoted directly. Testament of Abraham rounds this group out with solid, if unremarkable, alignment across all 3 axes. More primary passes, Testament of Moses, with a vivid eschatological hymn describing God's kingdom appearing. Sibylline Oracles, books 3 through 5, genuine Jewish monotheistic content delivered in a borrowed pagan oracle format. And the Prayer of Azariah and Song of the 3 Holy Children, a doxological insertion into the Daniel narrative, and honestly, one of the most explicitly God-centered texts in this whole batch. Now, secondary passes. I want to be really clear about what this tier means. These are fully used in scoring exactly like primary sources. The tag just tells you that a claim resting on one of these should read as a marginal pass, not equal strength evidence to a comfortable primary one. Testament of Job and 2nd Enoch both land exactly at the 60% floor on moral teaching density, rich in vision and endurance narrative, thinner on direct instruction. Joseph and Asenath lands exactly at the floor on Christological/divine focus, for the reason we already talked about. Susanna and Bel and the Dragon round out our secondary tier. Susanna's a courtroom vindication story. God's providence is invoked, but the engine of the story is legal, not devotional. Bel and the Dragon is a sharp anti-idolatry polemic told almost entirely as narrative rather than direct instruction. A word on how we're treating the additions to Daniel. Catholic and Orthodox tradition reads these as integrated parts of their own text of Daniel, not separate candidate material. For scoring consistency, we're treating them here as their own independent apocryphal candidates run through the same pipeline as everything else on this list. This is the same principle, Episode 6a, established with LDS canon. No single group's actual use of a text determines how this series scores it. That's a deliberate methodological choice, not a judgment on how any tradition actually reads its own scripture. Transparency cuts both ways, so two more candidates that crossed the desk this round and didn't make the cut. The Gospel of Barnabas fails Axis 1 and Axis 2 decisively. It denies the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the divinity of Christ. And the Herculaneum material recovered from the Vesuvius scrolls turned out to be pagan Epicurean philosophy, never even a candidate pool source to begin with. So here's where the registry stands after today. 7 primary passes, 5 secondary passes, 2 dismissed, 12 texts reviewed total. All 12 move in. 4 sources still need individual review. Kephaliah of the Teacher, the Firist of Ibn al-Nadim, 3 Enoch, and the Testament of Isaac. And Colburn, Mentina, and Mysteries of Heaven and Earth remain open. That's where Episode 8b picks up. As someone from an open canon tradition, I'll admit there's something familiar about a source list that keeps getting revisited as new review turns up new findings. But I want to be clear. This registry updates because of our Step 5 version control process, applied the same way to every text on this list. It's not a reflection of my own tradition's view of ongoing revelation. It's just good methodology. So that's where the numbers land across all 12 texts we covered today. You can see the spread on screen. Every score on this channel traces back to a specific text and a specific reason, including the ones that don't make the cut. That's the whole method. Full sourcing is in the description and the companion scripture and sources document for this episode. If this show's been useful, hit like, subscribe, and, genuinely, tell us what we got wrong. Corrections make this better. That's the whole point of showing our work. What should we cover next? Tell us in the comments. If it fits our method, it might move up the list. Next time, Episode 8b closes out the registry before Season 1a begins. Colburn and Mentina get single reconciled scores, Mysteries of Heaven and Earth closes out on attestation grounds, and 4 flagged sources get their individual review calls.